I think that worked. Okay, there we go. Why won't it let me play? Oh, do I? All right, so I'm going to be doing this presentation. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like anyone could make it, but if there's anyone watching this recording, hi, my name's Cassandra, and I made this presentation on how to ace the online pharmacy interview. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Accepted Together. First, I'm going to give a little bit background about myself. Oh, and if you're watching it online later on. So I'm going to be giving some information. I'll be showing what my packages are at the very end. And like I said before, please reach out to me on Accept Together if you have any follow-up questions. So I'll talk a little bit about me and who I am. My life sciences bachelor degree back in 2021. That's money that was postponed to 2022 due to the pandemic. And I am now a student at the University of Waterloo Pharmacy program. I'm in my second year, and I am currently doing one of my first co-op placements in my hometown at a PharmSave branch. Besides academics, I love spending time with my family. That's a picture of my grandfather on the left there. I call him my Opa. Him and I love to go out also, and novice artistic swimmer. It's something that I really love to do. I swam as a member at Queen's, and now I swim as a part of the University of Waterloo. And I'm also a very avid reader. I read 50 books last year, and I picked my top 4 over there on the right. I love some good Harry Potter. I actually listened to all 7 of the audiobooks last year. I loved The Help by Stoker, The Girls I've Been by Sharp, and The Lost Apothecary, just to keep it a little bit pharmacy, right? by Sarah Penner. Now let's move on into a little bit more of the content that I've prepared to talk about today, which is the online interview. So Toronto, British Columbia, and the University of Waterloo, which is where I now attend, as I said before. And they have all decided to keep their interviews online since the pandemic, and they've continued to keep them online as far as I've been able to tell from my research preparing for this, for this seminar. The University of Toronto and the University of British Columbia do their interviews in an asynchronous fashion, which, as some of you would know, is that it's when we record responses to our questions and somebody watches it later. Whereas at the University of Waterloo, they have a live panel who is interacting with you and talking you through the questions. It usually consists of 2 active pharmacists who are usually UW alumni from the program, and a pharmacy student, which is usually a final year or 4th year final pharmacy student who's helping with the application process. Each of these have their own pros and cons. Like from the asynchronous side, you have a more rigid time limit, I find, for the questions, whereas if you have a live audience, it's a little bit more flexible. For the timed ones at University of Toronto and University of British Columbia, say you have 3 minutes to answer a question, the video will cut you off even if you are done the sentence, whereas I found with my experience at the University of Waterloo, you're more likely to be a little bit more lenient by a couple of seconds with your answer and let you finish your sentence. But at the same time, a synchronous interview can have some added pressures and stress, as you do have a live audience, and I know that can be more stressful for some people. So it really is dependent on the individual, but either way, each of these will have pros and cons. I recommend always knowing the system that's being used. What's my screen going to look like? How do I navigate between different questions or different rooms? Each software has different features and is visually very different. So I definitely recommend taking the time to read the information that's given to you. Sometimes you can use they have like a trial run. That's the word I'm looking for. They have a trial availability to look through how the screens are going to work. Sometimes they'll let you do practice questions depending on the system. So I definitely recommend optimizing that. That's what's given to you by the different schools. You should look into how much time you're going to have for the questions. That will really help you while you're practicing, which is one of the most important things to do in preparing for an interview, whether it's virtual or in person. So that you can practice how much time you have to say things. Am I saying enough? Am I saying too little? Because as I said before, for the asynchronous ones, you are going to be cut right off at that time limit. For some of the systems and for the interviews at pharmacy school, from my experience, all 3 schools had a written component as a part of the interview process. So it's important to know how to enter your questions in the spaces. Actually, at the University of Waterloo as well, there is a math component. So you should know whether they're going to expect you to have just the number, or do you need to put in the units? Do I need to put the units into a different spot? It's important to look into the system and think of these questions before you go in to remove some of that added stress. Interviews can be stressful already, and any opportunity to remove some stress is a great thing. And then ID. So in my experience, all 3 schools required you to show ID to prove who you were with the online interview. And the second important question is, what kind of ID do I need? Short little story about the University of British Columbia. When I did my interview for them, this was back in 2021. It was in the middle of the pandemic. My driver's license had expired on me, so I didn't want to use that piece of ID because I didn't want to show an expired ID because I didn't know if that would get me into any issues. So I showed my health card. And I got an email back after I'd completed my interview for the University of British Columbia saying that I wasn't allowed to use my health card as my form of ID. So I had to quickly email them back and make sure that I was verified and that I was okay. But this is just to show that it is important to look into that kind of thing, because as I said, you don't need any of the added stress onto your day. And I like to share little things, the things that I learned from my experience, so that you guys, whoever watches, can learn from me, because I think that's the most important thing, is learning from the mistakes that other people have made. Get comfortable with your computer. I know it can be really awkward to talk to your computer, and then that's really okay. Before the pandemic, I had never really done anything like this where I'm talking to a computer. I've been used to in-person speaking and in-person presentations, but I know it can be sometimes awkward to talk to a computer because it feels like you're not talking to an actual person. And that's okay. Practice is perfect for that. You're going to hear me say that a lot throughout this video, because honestly, it's so true. Practice, practice, practice is just so important. So as soon as you get comfortable with your computer, I feel like that's a great step in getting better at the interview process for online interviews. So I would recommend practice talking to your computer, trying to keep your eyes on the camera. It can be so easy to look around you and get distracted by the things that you see in the room that you're in. But it's important to try and maintain eye contact with the computer so that it shows that you are engaged, and all sends across a great message to the schools. And watching your body language as well, so trying not to be too slumped, keeping nice posture and attentive. I feel like those are all important things with your computer. And maintaining a good image. I think that my image is not that great right now, but I can't tell because my video seems to be a little bit distorted on my end here. But trying to make sure that your head's not cut off in the camera, and all these things are just important things to think about that you don't have to think about when you're in an in-person interview, because you're there. Yeah. Picking your location. This is, I feel like, one of the very important things with an online interview. You have to make sure that the surroundings that you're in are professional, or just in general neat and tidy. Just kind of like my little picture here, because that was very true for my interview. I kept the clutter on the other side of the computer, and trying to just make sure that you have a nice neutral background behind you. Because again, that's not something you have to think about when you're doing an in-person interview. The location is set for you. Also thinking about other people and pets in your house. It's good to try and avoid loud noises so that your audio is getting across well. You don't want any of your audio to be distorted when a school is going back to listen to you, or when they're trying to listen to you live. So actually in my house, I was lucky. I lived with my mom and my dog. Her name's Poppy. And I was very lucky that my mom put the effort forth to take herself and the dog out whenever I had one of my 3 interviews to try and make sure that it was as quiet and as neutral as it could be. And finally, making sure you have a good internet connection. That's something that's really important. It's again, this is just one of those stress removing pieces. I think that that's really important totally throughout the interview process, is to remove anything that could cause you stress. Having your internet cut out and having like a video answer not completely uploading, or having to re-enter the live, like Waterloo's interview software, would just be something that I feel like would add extra stress onto you. So just testing where the best internet is, where's the best place that I won't have any problems. Yeah. The written portions, as I said before, all the 3 of the schools had a written portion for their interview process. It was mostly around a professional type of writing, so like think emails, letters, faxes, because these are all really important things in the pharmacy profession. We have to communicate with healthcare professionals all the time. In my co-op, we send messages to doctors and we receive messages from doctors and physicians and other prescribers all the time. And it's important that that communication is clear, it's professional, and that it's communicated well. So for this portion, it's important to know that how fast you can type and how fast you can type with correct spelling, because spelling is something that's very important for this section. Spelling and the grammar, I should say, are both very, very important for this section. It shows how good you can communicate. Using professional language, but using professional language in words that you can spell. Don't use words that you are not confident in the spelling of, because that is very important. You don't get a spell check on this portion, from my experience anyways. So it's important to just make sure that you use words that you can spell that get your point across in a professional way. And it's important to pay attention to the instructions. Some of them will have specific details. For example, to like not use like your own name so that it's anonymized. So those are really important things to pay attention to when the instructions are given to you either on the day of or in advance. Some require you to use critical thinking skills. So think Casper. So how to solve a problem. It really depends on the school and what they decide to do each year, but keep that in mind too, is that you might need to use some critical skills. And then the mental math, the University of Waterloo, there is a math component. There was in my year anyways. I'm assuming that's going to be carrying forward this year. And it's not math in the sense that you need to use complicated formulas. It's quick math that you have to do without a calculator that is drug related. So being able to do math quickly, like your multiplication, your division, practicing that if it's not something that you are overly strong in is very important, I feel. The 5-minute presentation at the University of Waterloo. So this is something that's unique to the University of Waterloo. In my year, we started out the interview process with a 5-minute presentation on any topic about you. I recommend doing something that makes you unique, what's something that doesn't stand out on your application by itself. And I feel like making it a story is a great method of doing this presentation, because it gives something, it's a great way for information to be relayed and to present. And I also recommend bringing pictures or props. It shows some preparation. It also gives people an idea of what you're talking about, especially if it's a topic that's not very well known or has terms in it that aren't great for the lay audience. So I feel like those are some real, they make your story more engaging. So I was going to give you guys a little example of what mine was. So I did mine on artistic swimming, and I'm going to do this a lot faster, but these are some of the pictures that I used. I printed them off to show the camera so I could show my live audience what I was talking about. So I actually got into artistic swimming through a med student mentor that I got paired with when I was in my second year. No, actually, I was in my first year. I joined artistic swimming in my second year, sorry. And she was an artistic swimmer, and she decided she wanted to start a novice team at the University of Queens. And she asked me to join, and I said yes, and I was really nervous about it. but I got to learn some really awesome new skills and meet a lot of awesome new people who also didn't know what they were doing. So it was okay that I didn't know what I was doing. I got to go to the University of British Columbia for our nationals. That's a picture of us on the right there. And that's us again at the University of British Columbia. I got put on the Academic All-Stars list. I got an award for having a high GPA while also being a varsity swimmer, which was a really great accomplishment. And then I also talked briefly about the pandemic and how that changed on the right there. That's something that we call land drilling, which is where we use our hands to pretend what we're doing with our legs. And because when we got online, we could no longer swim all the time together. So we did land drilling competitions instead of doing competitions in the water. So that briefly is what my presentation was. And I made it into a story from when I joined to the pandemic and how I adapted. And I tried to highlight different things that I learned about myself, like facing my fears of not being the best at something. I was always wanted to be the best at whatever I was doing. And this gave me an opportunity to know that it's okay to not always be the best at something as long as you're enjoying yourself, and how to adapt when things change. I also briefly talked about how I hope to be a part of the Waterloo swim team one day. I worked that into the presentation so that I could show that it was something that I wanted to continue doing. So this is not a picture that I showed because it happened after I got in. This is a picture of me and my team at the University of Waterloo. So shows that it came true. I feel like it's also important to share your personality. It's important to show what's not seen in your application, because the interview is the opportunity to show things that you don't necessarily say on your written application. It shows another side of you. What are things that make you different from other students? And you should talk about the experiences, the clubs, the volunteer work, all those fun things that are unique about you, things that you enjoy that make you the person that you are, and that makes you able to engage the people who are either listening to your videos live or who are listening to your videos later. So I threw a little example question in here that's found in the bank on Accepted Together. If you go into the bank and then into the pharmacy student questions. Your little cousin needs to complete 40 hours of volunteering for his school. He thinks volunteering is useless and serves no purpose since they don't get paid for it. He wants to study business at university. What are you going to tell him in order to convince him of the benefits of volunteering? So to share my personality in this question, I'd start it off by saying how important volunteer work is to me. In my experience, I volunteered at the hospital in my hometown from the time I was 15 until partway through university. I'd come back in the summer and I'd continue to volunteer. While I was at Queen's, I was a volunteer at the hospital there in the children's department. I worked as a volunteer for Swim with a Mission, which provides discounted one-on-one private lessons with kids with disabilities. I was a volunteer for the Rexdale Health Center. I worked as a tutor, providing tutoring help to high school students who needed it. So these are all experiences that I could throw into the beginning of this question to show a little bit about myself and how I feel about volunteering, which I think is really important to do in questions like this, is to highlight other things about yourself and then answer the question and why and how you would get him to convince him about the benefits of volunteering. So throwing in a little bit about yourself, I feel like will help answer questions like this. I feel like it's important to also know the school. There's values and traits that each school have that are very important to them and like to see in the students that are applying. So also important to highlight what the school is known for. So for example, the Waterloo is the only co-op pharmacy program in Canada. So co-op is something that's really important to you. Highlighting that and why it's important to you is really important when you're asked questions either about co-op or about why you would want to apply to the school. Because some schools will ask you, why do you want to come here? I understand you want to be a pharmacist, but why here? So that's also important and things like that. What about pharmacy issues? You should know about pharmacy issues and things that are going on in the industry. It shows that you are interested in the industry that you're applying to. So in my time in 2021, COVID vaccination process right? And things like right now with the minor ailment prescribing of 13 conditions like dysmenorrhea or UTIs, that's a really big thing right now, a really big and important thing in pharmacy. So that's something that you could highlight. The drug shortages that we've been seeing for things like Tylenol, Advil, the Paxlovid prescribing, National Pharmacare, I could go on and on and on. You could just pick something that's interesting to you. And if it's something that you can highlight in the interview, that you have an interest in that shows that you have an interest in the industry, I feel like that's really optimal for your interview experience. I do want to mention that this does not mean that you need to be an expert on drugs. I'm a pharmacy student. I'm still not an expert on drugs yet. So it doesn't mean that you need to know things like Abilify is Ariprazil and things like that. Just a general interest in something that is going on in pharmacy right now and knowing about the industry that you are hoping to get into. When synchronous, ask questions. I always think questions are important, really, really important when you have somebody in the field that you want to get into. It's important to ask them questions as they're always learning opportunities and networking opportunities. You get to learn so much from the people who are there. I got to ask questions to the pharmacists and the pharmacy students about their experiences in community, what skills they think are important for the process. I feel like it also shows that you are really interested in learning and becoming a part of the school, utilizing asking the student questions about their experience at the school. And if you have alumni from the school who are interviewing you, asking them about their experiences, I feel like those are all really valuable things, both for you to just learn despite how the interview goes. It's really just, it's a learning opportunity to ask questions. So don't be afraid of asking questions. They're always very happy to answer and happy to share with you what they know. Others' experiences can guide your experiences later in life. That's why I told you guys the ID story, so that you learn from an experience that I had. And as I said before, practice, practice, practice. I feel like practice is the most important thing. You can practice your timing, you can practice what you would say and how you would phrase it and how you would frame your answer. Practicing with a computer. Practice is just so key to the interview process, and it's something I could not recommend enough. And that's the end of my little spiel. These are my packages. Feel free to reach out to me to learn more about them, or if there's something else that you are interested in gaining from me, please reach out to me on Accepted Together, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And since there's nobody here, I can't do much of a Q&A, but definitely reach out to me with any questions that you have. I'm going to be ending this video now. I hope that if you're watching this later on, that you've learned something from it. And like I said, just please reach out if you have any questions. Bye.